I never told my son about my $40,000 monthly salary, even though he always saw me living a simple life. One day, he invited me to dinner with his wife's parents, who were visiting from overseas. I decided to see how they would treat a poor person, pretending to be a broke and naive mother. But as soon as I walked through the door of that upscale restaurant, everything changed. What happened that night completely shattered my daughter-in-law and her family in a way they never imagined. And trust me, they deserved it. Let me explain how I got there. Let me tell you who I really am. Because my son, Robert, who is 35 years old, never knew the truth about his mother. To him, I was always that woman who left early for the office, who came home tired in the evenings, who cooked with whatever was in the fridge. Just another employee. A secretary, perhaps. Someone ordinary. Nothing special. And I never corrected him. I never told him I earned $40,000 every month. That I had been a director at a multinational corporation for nearly 20 years. That I signed multi-million-dollar contracts. That I made decisions that affected thousands of people. Why tell him? Money was never something I needed to hang on the wall like a trophy. I grew up in an era where dignity was something you carried inside, where silence was worth more than empty words. So I kept my truth to myself. I lived in the same modest apartment for years. I used the same leather purse until it fell apart. I bought clothes at regular stores. I cooked at home. I saved everything. I invested everything. And I became wealthy in silence. Because true power doesn't shout. True power observes. And I observed closely when Robert called me that Tuesday afternoon. His voice sounded different, nervous, like when he was a kid and had done something wrong. "Mum, I need to ask you a favor. Chelsea's parents are visiting. They're coming from overseas. It's their first time here. They want to meet you. There's a dinner on Saturday at a restaurant. Please, come." Something in his tone made me uneasy. It wasn't the voice of a son inviting his mother. It was the voice of someone begging me not to embarrass him, to fit in, to make a good impression. "They know something about me?" I asked calmly. There was a silence. Then Robert stammered. "I told them you work at an office, that you live alone, that you're simple, that you don't have much." There it was, the word, simple, as if my entire life could be summed up in that miserable adjective, as if I were a problem he needed to apologize for. I took a deep breath, a very deep breath. "It's fine, Robert. I'll be there." I hung up. I stood looking at the living room of my apartment, old but comfortable furniture, walls without expensive artwork, a small TV, nothing to impress anyone. And in that moment, I decided, if my son thought I was a poor woman, if his wife's parents came ready to judge, then I would give them exactly what they expected to see. I would pretend to be broke, naive, desperate, a mother barely surviving. I wanted to personally experience how they treat someone who has nothing. I wanted to see their true faces, because I suspected something. I suspected that Chelsea and her family were the type of people who measure others by their wallet, and my instinct never fails. The Saturday arrived. I dressed in the most awful clothes I owned, a light grey, shapeless, wrinkled dress, the kind they sell at flea markets, old, worn-out shoes, no jewellery, not even a watch. I took a faded canvas tote bag. I pulled my hair back into a messy ponytail. I looked in the mirror. I looked like a woman destroyed by life. Forgettable. Perfect. But before I continue, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell, because what's coming next is going to leave you speechless. I promise you. I got into a taxi. I gave the driver the address. A restaurant in the most expensive area of the city, like the Upper East Side in New York. One of those places where the menu doesn't have prices, where every table costs more than a normal person's monthly paycheck. As we drove, I felt something strange, a mixture of anticipation and sadness. Anticipation because I knew something big was coming. Sadness because a part of me still hoped I was wrong. I hoped they would treat me well, that they would be kind, that they would see past the old clothes. But the other part, the one that worked 40 years among corporate sharks, that part knew exactly what to expect. The taxi stopped in front of the restaurant. Warm lights, doorman in white gloves, elegant people going in. I paid the driver. I got out. I took a deep breath. I crossed the door. And there they were. Robert was standing next to a long table near the windows. He was wearing a dark suit, white shirt, shiny shoes. He looked nervous. Next to him was Chelsea, my daughter-in-law. She wore a beige dress with gold accents, high heels, her perfectly straight hair falling over her shoulders. She looked impeccable, as always. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking towards the entrance with a tense, almost ashamed expression. And then I saw them, Chelsea's parents, already seated at the table, waiting like royalty on their thrones. Her mother, Deborah, wore a tight emerald green dress covered in sequins, jewelry on her neck, on her wrists, on her fingers. Her black hair was pulled back in an elegant bun. She had that kind of cold, calculated beauty that intimidates. Next to her was Anthony, her husband. Impeccable grey suit, a massive watch on his wrist, a serious expression. Both looked like they'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. I walked towards them, slowly, with short steps, as if I were afraid. Robert saw me first, and his face changed. His eyes widened. He looked at me up and down. I noticed him swallow hard. "Mum, you said you were coming." His voice sounded uncomfortable. "Of course. Son, I'm here." I smiled shyly, the smile of a woman not accustomed to places like this. Chelsea greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek, cold, mechanical. "Mother-in-law, good to see you." Her eyes said the opposite. She introduced me to her parents with a strange, almost apologetic tone. "Dad, Mum, this is Jeanette, Robert's mother." Deborah looked up. She looked at me. And in that instant, I saw everything. The judgment, the contempt, the disappointment. Her eyes scanned my wrinkled dress, my old shoes, my canvas tote bag. She didn't say anything at first. She just extended her hand, cold, quick, lifeless. "Pleased to meet you." Anthony did the same. A weak handshake, a fake smile. Delighted. I sat down in the chair at the end of the table, the one furthest from them, as if I were a second-class guest. No one helped me sit down. No one asked if I was comfortable. The waiter arrived with the menus. Elegant, heavy, in French. I opened them and pretended not to understand anything. Deborah was watching me. "Do you need help with the menu?" she asked with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, please." I don't know what these words mean. My voice came out small, shy. She sighed. She ordered for me. "Something simple," she said. "Something that doesn't cost too much. We don't want to overdo it." The phrase hung in the air. Anthony nodded. Robert looked away. Chelsea fiddled with her napkin. No one said a word, and I just observed. Deborah began to talk, first about general things, about the trip from Asia, how exhausting the flight was, how different everything was here. Then she started talking about money, subtly at first. She mentioned the hotel where they were staying. $500 a night. She mentioned the car they had rented. Luxury, obviously. She mentioned the stores they had visited. We bought a few things, nothing crazy, just a few $1,000s. She spoke looking at me, as if expecting a reaction, as if expecting me to be impressed. I just nodded. That's nice, I said. How lovely, she continued. You know, Jeanette, we've always been very careful with money. We work hard. We invest well. Now we have properties in 3 countries. Anthony has important businesses. And me, well, I oversee our investments. She smiled, a smile of superiority. And what exactly do you do, Jeanette? Her tone was sweet but venomous. I work in an office, I replied, looking down. I do a little bit of everything. Paperwork, filing, simple things. Deborah exchanged a look with Anthony. Oh, I see. Administrative work. That's fine. That's honest. All jobs are respectable, right? Of course, I replied. The food arrived. Huge plates with small portions, everything decorated like edible art. Deborah cut her steak with precision. This costs $80, she said. But it's worth it. You pay for quality. You can't just eat anything. Right, Jeanette? I nodded. Of course, you're right. Robert tried to change the subject. He talked about work, about some projects. Deborah interrupted him. Son, does your mother live alone? Robert nodded. Yes, she has a small apartment. Deborah looked at me with feigned pity. It must be difficult, isn't it? Living alone at your age? Without much support. And does your salary cover everything? I felt the trap closing. Barely, I replied. But I manage. I save where I can. I don't need much. Deborah sighed dramatically. Oh, Jeanette, you are so brave. Really. I admire women who struggle on their own. Although, of course, one always wishes to give our children more. To give them a better life. But oh well, everyone gives what they can. There it was. The blow. Soft but deadly. She was telling me I hadn't been enough for my son. That I hadn't given him what he deserved. That I was a poor, insufficient mother. Chelsea looked at her plate. Robert was clenching his fists under the table. And I just smiled. Yes, you're right. Everyone gives what they can. Deborah continued. We always made sure Chelsea had the best. She went to the best schools. She travelled the world. She learned 4 languages. Now she has an excellent job. She earns very well. And when she married Robert, well, we helped them a lot. We gave them money for the down payment on the house. We paid for their honeymoon, because that's how we are. We believe in supporting our children. She looked at me intently. And you, Jeanette, were you able to help Robert with anything when he got married? The question hung like a sharp knife. Not much, I replied. I gave them what I could, a small gift. Deborah smiled. How sweet. Every detail counts, right? The amount doesn't matter. What matters is the intention. And right then, in that moment, I felt the rage beginning to awaken inside me. The rage wasn't explosive. It was cold, controlled, like a river under ice. I breathed slowly. I maintained my shy smile. I let Deborah keep talking, because that's what people like her do. They talk. They inflate themselves. They show off. And the more they talk, the more they reveal, the more they expose themselves. the more they show the emptiness they carry inside. Deborah picked up her glass of wine. Red, expensive. She swirled it in her hand as if she were an expert. This wine is from an exclusive region in France. It costs $200 a bottle. But when you know quality, you don't skimp. Do you drink wine, Jeanette? Only on special occasions, I replied. And usually the cheapest kind. I don't know much about these things. Deborah smiled condescendingly. Oh, don't worry. Not everyone has a trained palate. That comes with experience, with travel, with education. We've visited vineyards in Europe, in South America, in California. Anthony and I are quite knowledgeable. Anthony nodded. It's a hobby, something we enjoy. Chelsea is learning too. She has good taste. She inherited it from us. She looked at Chelsea with pride. Chelsea offered a weak smile. Thanks, Mum. Deborah turned back to me. And you, Jeanette? Do you have any hobbies? Anything you enjoy doing in your free time? I shrugged. I watch TV, I cook, I walk in the park. Simple things. Deborah and Anthony exchanged another look, a look loaded with meaning, of silent judgment. How lovely, Deborah said. Simple things have their charm too. Although, of course, one always aspires to more, right? To see the world, to experience new things, to grow culturally. But oh well, I understand not everyone has those opportunities. I nodded. You're right. Not everyone has those opportunities. The waiter arrived with dessert, small portions of something that looked like edible art. Deborah ordered the most expensive one. $30 for a piece of cake the size of a cookie. And this is delicious, she said after the first bite. It has edible gold on top. See, those little golden flakes. It's a detail that only the best restaurants offer. I took my dessert. Simpler, cheaper. I tasted it in silence. Deborah continued. You know, Jeanette, I think it's important we talk about something, as a family, now that we're all here. She looked up. Her expression changed. It became serious, maternal, fake. Robert is our son-in-law, and we love him very much. Chelsea loves him. And we respect that decision. But as parents, we always want the best for our daughter. Robert tensed up. Mum, I don't think this is the time. Deborah raised her hand. Let me finish. Son, this is important. She looked at me. Jeanette, I understand you did the best you could with Robert. I know raising him alone wasn't easy. And I respect you for that. Truly. But Robert is at another stage in his life now. He's married. He has responsibilities. And well, Chelsea and he deserve to have stability. Stability? I asked softly. Yes, Deborah replied. Financial stability. Emotional. We've helped a lot, and we'll continue to help. But we also believe it's important that Robert doesn't have unnecessary burdens. Her tone was clear. She was calling me a burden. Me, her daughter's mother-in-law, her husband's mother. Chelsea was staring at her plate as if she wanted to disappear. Robert had his jaw clenched. Burdens, I repeated. Deborah sighed. I don't want to sound harsh, Jeanette. But at your age, living alone, with a limited salary, it's natural for Robert to worry about you. To feel like he has to take care of you. And that's fine. He's a good son. But we don't want that worry to affect his marriage. Do you understand me? Perfectly, I replied. Deborah smiled. It's good that you understand. That's why we wanted to talk to you. Anthony and I have thought of something. She paused dramatically. We could help you, financially. Give you a small monthly allowance, something that allows you to live more comfortably, without Robert having to worry so much. Obviously, it would be modest. We can't work miracles, but it would be a support. I remained silent, looking at her, waiting. She continued. And in return, we would only ask that you respect Robert and Chelsea's space, that you don't call them as often, that you don't pressure them, that you give them the freedom to build their life together, without interference. How does that sound? There it was, the offer, the bribe disguised as charity. They wanted to buy me. They wanted to pay me to disappear from my son's life, so I wouldn't be an obstacle, so I wouldn't embarrass their precious daughter with my poverty. Robert exploded. Mum, this is enough. You don't have to. Deborah interrupted him. Robert, calm down. We're talking like adults. Your mother understands. Right, Jeanette? I picked up my napkin, to meet her. I calmly wiped my lips. I took a sip of water. I let the silence grow. Everyone was looking at me. Deborah with expectation. Anthony with arrogance. Chelsea with shame. Robert with desperation. And then I spoke. My voice was different. It was no longer shy. It was no longer small. It was firm, clear, cold. That's an interesting offer, Deborah. Really very generous of you. Deborah smiled victoriously. I'm glad you see it that way. I nodded. But I have a few questions, just to understand properly. Deborah blinked. Of course. Ask whatever you want. I leaned slightly forward. How much exactly would you consider a modest monthly allowance? $500? 1,000? Deborah hesitated. Well, we were thinking about 500, maybe 700. It depends. I nodded. I see. $700 a month for me to disappear from my son's life. Deborah frowned. I wouldn't put it like that. But yes. I would, I replied. That's exactly how you put it. She adjusted in her chair. Jeanette, I don't want you to misunderstand. We just want to help. Of course, I said. Help, like you helped with the down payment on the house. How much was that? $30,000? Deborah nodded proudly. 40,000, in fact. Ah, 40,000. How generous. And the honeymoon? 15,000, Deborah said. It was a 3-week trip through Europe. Incredible, I replied. So you have invested about $55,000 in Robert and Chelsea. Deborah smiled. Well, when you love your children, you don't skimp. I nodded slowly. You're right. When you love your children, you don't skimp. But tell me something, Deborah. All that investment, all that money, did it buy you anything? Deborah blinked, confused. How so? Did it buy you respect? I continued. Did it buy you real love? Or did it just buy obedience? The atmosphere changed. Deborah stopped smiling. Excuse me? My tone became sharper. You've been talking about money all night. How much things cost. How much you spent. How much you have. But you haven't asked once how I am. If I'm happy. If anything hurts me. If I need company. You've only calculated my worth. And apparently I'm worth $700 a month. Deborah went pale. I didn't. Yes, you did, I interrupted her. Yes, you did. Since I arrived, you've been measuring my value with your wallet. And you know what I've discovered, Deborah? I've discovered that the people who only talk about money are the ones who least understand their true value. Anthony intervened. I think you're misinterpreting my wife's intentions. Oh, really? I looked directly at him. And what are her intentions? To treat me with pity? To humiliate me throughout dinner? To offer me charity to make me disappear? Anthony opened his mouth, but said nothing. Robert was pale. Mum, please. I looked at him. No, Robert. Please, no. I'm done being quiet. I put the napkin on the table. I leaned back in my chair. There was no shyness in my posture anymore, no shrinking back. I looked at Deborah directly in the eyes. She held the gaze for a second, then looked away, uncomfortable. Something had changed, and she felt it. Everyone felt it. Deborah, you said something very interesting a moment ago. You said you admire women who struggle on their own, that they are brave. Deborah nodded slowly. Yes, I did. Then let me ask you something. Have you ever struggled on your own? Have you ever worked without your husband backing you? Have you ever built something with your own hands without your family's money? Deborah stammered. I have my own achievements. Like what? I asked with genuine curiosity. Tell me. Deborah smoothed her hair. I manage our investments. I oversee properties. I make important decisions in our businesses. I nodded. Businesses that your husband built. Properties that you bought together. Investments made with the money he generated? Or am I wrong? Anthony intervened, annoyed. That's not fair. My wife works just as hard as I do. Of course, I replied calmly. I don't doubt that she works. But there is a difference between managing money that already exists and creating it from scratch. Between overseeing an empire that was handed to you and building it brick by brick, don't you think? Deborah pressed her lips together. I don't know where you're going with this. Let me explain, Jeanette, I replied. 40 years ago, I was 23 years old. I was a secretary at a small company in Los Angeles. I earned minimum wage. I lived in a rented room. I ate the cheapest food I could find. And I was alone, completely alone. Robert was staring at me. I had never told him this in such detail. I continued. One day I got pregnant. The father disappeared. My family turned their back on me. I had to decide whether to keep going or give up. I chose to keep going. I worked until the last day of my pregnancy. I went back to work 2 weeks after Robert was born. A neighbor looked after him during the day. I worked 12 hours a day. I paused. I drank water. No one spoke. But I didn't stay a secretary. I studied at night. I took courses. I learned English at the public library. I learned accounting, finance, management. I became an expert in things no one taught me, all on my own. All while raising a child alone. All while paying rent, food, medicine, clothes. Deborah was looking at her plate. Her arrogance was beginning to crumble. And you know what happened, Deborah? I was promoted, little by little, from secretary to assistant, from assistant to coordinator, from coordinator to manager, from manager to director. It took me 20 years. 20 years of relentless work, of sacrifices you can't even imagine. But I did it. And you know how much I earn now? I asked. Deborah shook her head. $40,000 a month. The silence was absolute, as if someone had pressed a pause button on the universe. Robert dropped his fork. Chelsea's eyes were wide. Anthony frowned in disbelief, and Deborah froze with her mouth slightly open. $40,000, I repeated. Every month, for almost 20 years. That's nearly $10 million in gross income over the course of my career, not counting investments, not counting bonuses, not counting company stock. Deborah blinked several times. No, I don't understand. You earn $40,000 a month. That's right, I replied calmly. I'm the regional operations director for a multinational corporation. I oversee 5 countries. I manage budgets of hundreds of millions of dollars. I make decisions that affect more than 10,000 employees. I sign contracts that you couldn't read without lawyers. And I do it every day. Robert was pale. Mum, why did you never tell me? I looked at him tenderly. Because you didn't need to know, son. Because I wanted you to grow up valuing effort, not money. Because I wanted you to develop as a person, not as an heir. Because money corrupts. And I wasn't going to let it corrupt you. But then, Chelsea whispered, why do you live in that small apartment? Why do you wear simple clothes? Why don't you have a luxury car? I smiled. Because I don't need to impress anyone. Because true wealth is not displayed. Because I learned that the more you have, the less you need to prove it. I looked at Deborah. That's why I came dressed like this tonight. That's why I pretended to be poor. That's why I acted like a broke and naive woman. I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I had nothing. I wanted to see your true colors. And boy, did I see them, Deborah. I saw them perfectly. Deborah was red, with shame, with rage, with humiliation. This is ridiculous. If you earned that much money, we would know. Robert would know. Why would he think you're poor? Because I let him, I replied. Because I never talked to him about my job. Because I live simply. Because the money I earn, I invest. I save it. I multiply it. I don't spend it on flashy jewelry or showing off in expensive restaurants. Anthony cleared his throat. Still, this doesn't change the fact that you were rude, that you misinterpreted our intentions. Really, Mal? I looked straight at him. Did I misinterpret when you said I was a burden to Robert? Did I misinterpret when you offered to pay me $700 to disappear from his life? Did I misinterpret every condescending comment about my clothes, my job, my life? Anthony didn't answer. Neither did Deborah. I stood up. Everyone looked at me. Let me tell you something that clearly no one has ever told you. Money doesn't buy class. It doesn't buy real education. It doesn't buy empathy. You have money, maybe a lot, but you don't have an ounce of what really matters. Deborah stood up too, furious. And you do? You who lied? Who deceived us? Who made us look like fools? I didn't make you look like fools, I replied coldly. You took care of that all by yourselves. I just gave you the opportunity to show who you are. And you did. Magnificently. Chelsea had tears in her eyes. Mother-in-law, I didn't know. I know, I interrupted her. You didn't know, but your parents knew what they were doing. They knew they were humiliating me, and they enjoyed it, until they discovered that the poor woman they despised has more money than they do. And now they don't know what to do with that information. Deborah was trembling. You have no right. I have every right, I replied, because I am your son-in-law's mother, because I deserve respect. Not because of my money, not because of my job, but because I'm a human being. Something you forgot throughout this entire dinner. Robert stood up. Mum, please, let's go. I looked at him. Not yet, son. I'm not finished yet. I looked at Deborah one last time. You offered to help me with $700 a month. Let me make you a counteroffer. I'll give you $1 million right now if you can prove to me that you ever treated someone who didn't have money well in your lives. Deborah opened her mouth. She closed it. She said nothing. Exactly, I replied. You can't. Because to you, people are only worth what they have in the bank. And that's the difference between you and me. I built wealth. You just spend it. I earned respect. You buy it. I have dignity. You have bank accounts. I picked up my old canvas tote bag. I pulled out a credit card. Black. Platinum. I dropped it on the table in front of Deborah. This is my corporate card. Unlimited limit. Pay the dinner. The whole thing, with a generous tip. Consider it a gift. From a broken, naive mother. Deborah looked at the card as if it were a poisonous snake. Black. Shiny. With my name engraved in silver letters. Jeanette Miller, Regional Director. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked it up. She flipped it over. She looked at it. Then she looked at me. Her eyes no longer had that gleam of superiority. Now there was something different. Something I never thought I'd see in her. Fear. I don't need your money, she said with a broken voice. I know, I replied. But I didn't need your pity either. And yet you offered it to me throughout the entire dinner. So take it as a gesture of courtesy, or education. Something you clearly didn't learn, despite all your travels through Europe. Anthony softly hit the table. Enough. This has gotten out of hand. You're disrespecting us. Respect, I repeated. How interesting that you use that word now. Where was your respect when your wife asked if my salary was enough to live on? Where was it when she suggested I was a burden to my son? Where was it when she offered to buy me off so I would disappear? Anthony clenched his jaw. Deborah just wanted to help. No, I corrected him. Deborah wanted to control. She wanted to make sure the poor mother didn't ruin her daughter's perfect image. She wanted to eliminate the weak link in the chain. The problem is you picked the wrong link. I looked at Chelsea. Her head was bowed, her hands in her lap, trembling. Chelsea, I said softly. She looked up. Tears were running down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't know that my parents... Don't finish that sentence, I interrupted her. Because you did know. Maybe you didn't know about my money, but you knew what your parents are like. You know them. You know how they treat people they consider inferior, and you did nothing to stop them. Chelsea sobbed. I wanted to say something, but they're my parents. I know, I replied, and Robert is my son. And yet I let him make his own decisions. I let him choose his life, his wife, his path. Because that's how you love, with freedom, not with control. Not with money, not with manipulation. Robert came closer to me. Mum, forgive me, please. Forgive me for never asking, for assuming, for thinking you were... His voice broke. I hugged him. You don't have to apologize, son. I did what I did for a reason. I wanted you to be independent, to value the right things, not to depend on me financially, to build your own life. But you made me feel like I had to protect you, Robert said. That I had to worry about you, that you were fragile. I know, I replied. And it wasn't wrong for you to think that, because that's how you learned to care, to worry about others, to be empathetic. Those are lessons money can't buy. Robert hugged me tightly. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Deborah was still standing, rigid, watching the scene with a mixture of confusion and contained rage. This changes nothing, she finally said. You lied, You deceived us. You came here with hidden intentions. You acted in bad faith. That's true, I nodded. I acted. I pretended to be something I'm not. Exactly what you do every day. What is that supposed to mean? Anthony asked. It means you hide behind your money, behind your jewelry, behind your trips, behind everything you can buy. But inside you are empty. You don't have deep conversations. You don't have real interests. You have nothing to offer beyond a bank account. Deborah laughed, a dry, bitter laugh. Coming from someone who lied all night, that's hypocrisy. Maybe, I replied. But my lie exposed the truth, yours. And now you can't hide. Now you know that I saw you, that I felt every comment, that I saved every insult disguised as advice, and that I will never forget it. The waiter approached timidly. Excuse me, would you like anything else? Anthony sharply shook his head. Just the check. The waiter nodded and disappeared. Deborah sat down again, defeated. Her posture was no longer elegant. It was the posture of someone who had just lost something important. And it wasn't money, it was power. Jeanette, she said in a softer, less aggressive voice, I don't want this to ruin the relationship between our families. Robert and Chelsea love each other. They have a life together. We can't let this… I interrupted her. Let this what? Ruin your plans? Expose what you really think? It's too late for that, Deborah. The damage is done, but we can fix it, she insisted. We can start over. We can. No, I cut her off firmly. We can't. Because now I know who you are, and you know who I am. And that truth cannot be erased with empty apologies or fake smiles. You treated me like trash. And you did it willingly, with pleasure, because you thought you could. Anthony cleared his throat. You were the one who came here lying. You provoked this situation. You're right, I nodded. I provoked this. Because I needed to know. I needed to confirm what I already suspected. That you are not good people. That your money doesn't make you better. That you are exactly the kind of people who despise others for not having the same. Deborah wiped a tear. We're not bad people. Perhaps not, I replied. But you are definitely not good people, and there is a huge difference between those two things. The waiter returned with the check. He placed it in the center of the table. No one touched it. Deborah looked at my black card still in her hands. Then she looked at me. I'm not going to use your card, she said. We will pay our own bill, as we always do. Perfect, I replied. Then keep that card as a souvenir. As a reminder that not everything is as it seems, that the woman you despised all night has more than you will ever have. And I'm not just talking about money. Deborah put the card on the table. I don't want it. I don't want your moral lesson either. I pushed it back toward her. Keep it anyway. Because something tells me you're going to need it. One day you're going to run into someone like me. Someone who pretends to be less than they are. And you're going to make the same mistake again. Because people like you never learn. Anthony took out his wallet. He pulled out several credit cards. All gold. All shiny. He chose one and placed it on the check. The waiter took it and left. No one spoke during those minutes of waiting. The silence was dense, uncomfortable, heavy. Chelsea was crying silently. Robert was holding my hand. Deborah was looking at the wall. Anthony was checking his phone to avoid eye contact. The waiter returned. Sir, your card was declined. Anthony looked up sharply. What? It was declined, the waiter repeated. Do you have another form of payment? Anthony turned red. That's impossible. That card has a very high limit. It must be a system error. The waiter shrugged. I can try again if you like. Anthony handed him another card. The waiter left. Deborah looked nervously at her husband. What happened? I don't know, Anthony replied, irritated. It must be a bank error. Maybe they froze the account for security. It happens sometimes when you travel. I nodded with feigned understanding. Of course, those things happen. What an inconvenience. The waiter returned again. I'm sorry, sir. This one was also declined. Anthony stood up. This is ridiculous. I'm going to call the bank right now. He stormed out of the restaurant, furious. Deborah remained seated, ashamed, humiliated. This has never happened to us, she murmured. Never. What bad timing, I commented without emotion. Robert looked at the check. Mum, I can… No, I interrupted him. You're not going to pay anything. I took out my wallet, a simple old leather wallet. I pulled out another card. This one wasn't black. It was transparent, made of metal, heavy, a card that less than 1% of people in the world have. I placed it on the table in front of Deborah. She looked at it. Her eyes widened. She recognized what it was. That's a Centurion card. That's right, I replied. American Express, exclusive invitation, minimum annual spending requirement of $250,000. $5,000 annual fee just to have it, and benefits that you will never be able to imagine. Deborah didn't say anything. The waiter took the card carefully, as if it were something sacred. He returned in less than 2 minutes. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Everything is settled. Would you like the receipt? It's not necessary, I replied. The waiter nodded and left. Deborah was still looking at the space where the card had been. I stood up. I picked up my old wallet, my canvas tote bag. I looked at Deborah one last time. The dinner was delicious. Thank you for the recommendation for the place. And thank you for showing me exactly who you are. You saved me a lot of time, a lot of energy, and many future disappointments. Deborah finally looked up. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from contained rage. This doesn't end here, she said in a trembling voice. You can't just humiliate us and walk out as if nothing happened. Chelsea is our daughter. Robert is our son-in-law. We're still going to be family. You're going to have to see us. I smiled. You're right. I'm going to have to see you. At birthdays, at Christmas, at family gatherings, but now I will see you differently. I won't wonder what you think of me anymore. I already know, and you will know that I know. And you will live with that. Every time you see me, every time you pretend to be kind, you will remember this night. Anthony returned to the table. He had his phone in his hand. His face was pale. There's a problem with the accounts, he said. A temporary block. For security. It will be resolved tomorrow. He looked at the table. Did you pay already? Yes, Deborah replied without looking at him. She paid. Anthony looked at me. His pride was in pieces. Thank you, he murmured. It was barely audible. You're welcome, I replied. That's what family is for, isn't it? To help each other, especially when someone needs a small monthly allowance. Say, $700, or in this case, $1,800. Is that what this dinner cost? Anthony closed his eyes. Deborah clenched her fists in her lap. Robert approached. Mum, let's go. Please, that's enough. I looked at him. You're right. That's enough. I turned to Chelsea. She was still crying silently. Chelsea, I said softly. She lifted her head. It's not your fault what your parents are like. No one chooses their family. But you do choose how you act, how you treat others, how you raise your own children someday. Chelsea nodded through tears. I'm sorry, she whispered again. Don't apologize again, I told her. Just learn. Learn that money doesn't define people, that humility is not weakness, that respecting others costs nothing, and that if you ever have children, teach them to see people's hearts, not their bank accounts. Chelsea sobbed harder. Robert hugged her. Deborah looked away. Anthony was checking his phone again, avoiding all eye contact. I headed for the exit. I took a few steps. Then I stopped. I turned around one last time. Oh, Deborah, one more thing. She looked at me. Do you remember when you said you speak 4 languages? Deborah frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Just curious, I replied. In which of those 4 languages did you learn to be kind? Because clearly it wasn't in any of them. Deborah opened her mouth, but no words came out. Exactly, I said. You can speak 100 different languages and still not say anything worth hearing. I walked out of the restaurant. Robert walked beside me. The cool night air hit my face. I took a deep breath. I felt like a huge weight had been lifted off me. Not a physical weight, an emotional weight. The weight of pretending, of tolerating, of keeping quiet, of being less than I was. Robert took my arm. Mum, are you okay? Perfectly fine, I replied. Better than ever. And you? Robert sighed. I don't know. I'm processing everything. I can't believe you never told me about your job, about your money, about everything you achieved. I stopped. I looked him in the eyes. Does it bother you? He quickly shook his head. No, of course not. I'm proud. Incredibly proud. But I also feel foolish, blind. You're not foolish, I told him. You simply saw what I wanted you to see. And I did it on purpose. Because I needed you to grow up without depending on me. Without feeling like you had a financial safety net waiting for you. I needed you to strive, to work, to value everything you achieved on your own. Robert nodded. I understand. But now I also understand why you never complained. Why you never asked for help. Why you always seemed so calm. Why you didn't need anything. I smiled. I needed many things, son. Only none of them could be bought with money. I needed to see you grow up, see you become a good man, see you make the right decisions, and you did it, in your own way. Even marrying Chelsea? He asked weakly. Even marrying Chelsea, I replied. She is not her parents. She can learn. She can change. But that depends on her, and on you, on how you build your relationship, on what values you choose to follow. Robert was silent, processing, thinking. A taxi stopped in front of us. I had requested it as we walked out. I opened the door. Robert stopped me. Mum, can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you do it? Why did you come pretending to be poor? Why didn't you just tell them the truth from the beginning? I closed the taxi door. I turned to him. Because I needed to know, son. I needed to confirm if my suspicions were true. If Chelsea's family was really as I imagined. And unfortunately, I was right. Robert lowered his gaze. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize for them, I told him. But you do have to decide what kind of husband you want to be, what kind of father you want to be someday." "What do you mean?" he asked. "I mean that you just saw two very different ways of handling money and power. Your in-laws' way and mine. They use it to control, to humiliate, to feel superior. I use it to have freedom, to help without showing off, to live peacefully. You decide which path to follow." Robert nodded slowly. "I understand." I opened the taxi door again. I got in. I rolled down the window. Robert came closer. "Mum, one last question. Tell me, are you ever going to forgive Deborah and Anthony?" I thought about it for a moment. "Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting," I replied. "Nor does it mean allowing it to happen again. I might forgive them someday. When I see a real change, when they see people as people, not as numbers. But until then, I'll simply be polite, distant, and extremely careful." "And me?" Robert asked. "Do you forgive me?" For not asking, for assuming, for allowing this scene to happen. I looked at him tenderly. "Son, there's nothing to forgive. You did what you thought was right. You wanted your family to meet. That's beautiful. What happened afterward was not your fault. It was theirs, and a little bit mine too. Because I chose to play their game." Robert smiled faintly. "You won." "I won," I nodded. "But I don't feel victorious. I feel tired and sad. Because I confirmed something I didn't want to confirm. That there are people who will never change. That there are broken families even with money. That there are voids no bank account can fill." The taxi driver cleared his throat. "Ma'am, shall we go?" "Yes," I replied. "Give me a second." I looked at Robert one last time. "Go be with Chelsea. Talk to her. Listen to her. Support her. But also be honest. Tell her how you felt tonight. Tell her what you expect from her family. And from her. Because if you don't set boundaries now, this is going to repeat itself. Over and over." "I will," Robert promised. "I love you, Mum. And I mean it more now than ever. Because now I know who you really are. And you are incredible." I smiled. "I love you too, son. I always have. I always will. Regardless of how much money I have or don't have. Because love is priceless. And that's a lesson Deborah and Anthony will never learn." Robert stepped away from the taxi. I signaled to the driver to, "We can go." The taxi pulled away. I looked out the window. I saw Robert walking back towards the restaurant, with his shoulders slumped, thoughtful. He was probably going back to find Chelsea, to confront his in-laws, to have difficult conversations. And I felt proud, because that meant he was maturing, that he was learning, that he was choosing to be better than the example he had just witnessed. The taxi drove through the city's illuminated streets. I closed my eyes. I thought about everything that had happened, about every word, about every look, about every moment of tension. And I wondered if I had done the right thing, if I had been too harsh, too cruel, too vengeful. But then I remembered every disguised insult, every condescending comment, every look of contempt. And I knew I hadn't. I hadn't been too anything. I had simply been honest. Finally. The taxi drove through the empty streets of the night. The lights of the buildings passed quickly by the window. I opened my old canvas tote bag and pulled out my phone. A simple phone. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would draw attention. It had 3 unread messages. One from my assistant asking about a Monday meeting. another from a colleague congratulating me on a closed contract, and one from an unknown number. I opened the unknown message. It was from Chelsea. "Mother-in-law, please forgive me. I didn't know my parents would be like that. I'm so ashamed. I need to talk to you. Please." I looked at the message for a long time. I thought about replying. Then I decided not to. Not yet. I needed time. She needed it too. Rushed words from guilt rarely mean anything real. True changes take time, reflection, consistent action. I put the phone away. The taxi driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Excuse me for asking, Mum. Is everything okay?" I looked up and met his gaze. "Yes, everything is fine. Why?" "It's just that you got in very quietly. And usually people coming out of that restaurant are happy, talking about how delicious the dinner was. You came out as if you'd been in a war." I smiled slightly. "Something like that. Was it that obvious?" He shrugged. "I've been driving a taxi for 20 years. I've seen it all. Drunk people, people fighting, couples breaking up, families arguing. And you have that look. That look of someone who just said something they've been holding on to for years." "That's perceptive," I told him. "It's my job," he replied. "Besides, it helps pass the time. Do you want to talk about it?" "You don't have to. But sometimes it helps to tell things to a stranger. Someone who won't judge you. Someone who doesn't know you." I thought about his offer. It was tempting, but I shook my head. "Thank you, but I think I've talked enough for today." He nodded. "I understand. But let me tell you something. Whatever happened in there, you did the right thing. I know because you are calm. You're not crying, you're not yelling, you're processing. And that means you spoke your truth. And the truth always brings peace, even if it hurts." His words surprised me. He was an older man, maybe in his 60s, with grey hair and hard-working hands. A simple man, like I was pretending to be. "Do you believe in the truth?" I asked him. "I believe in honesty," he replied. "Not always in the absolute truth, because the truth changes depending on who tells it. But honesty doesn't. Honesty is saying things the way you feel them, without masks, without lies. Even if it hurts, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it costs you something." I nodded. "You're right. My wife always told me I was too direct," he continued. "That I said things without a filter. That I hurt people without meaning to. And maybe she was right. But she also told me that she never doubted me, because she knew that what came out of my mouth was real. Not calculated, not manipulated, just real," I smiled. "She sounds like a good woman." "She was," he replied. "She died 5 years ago." "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. He shook his head. "Don't be. We had 40 years together. 40 years of honesty. Of fights. Of making up. Of laughter. Of tears. And not a single day did I go to sleep wondering what she really thought. Because she always said it. And I did too. That's a gift." "You're right," I murmured. "It is a gift." The taxi stopped at a red light. "Can I ask you something personal?" the taxi driver said. "Go ahead." "Are you rich?" The question took me by surprise, not because of the question itself, but because of the direct way he asked it. "Why do you ask that?" "Because I picked you up from a $1,000 per person restaurant. But you dress like someone who shops at discount stores. You have an old purse, worn shoes, but you talk like an executive. You move like someone with power. And you paid my taxi with new bills you took from a wallet that looks 20 years old. Observant, I commented. Part of the job, he repeated. So, are you? It depends on how you define rich, I replied. If you're talking about money, yes, I have enough, more than enough. If you're talking about happiness, also, yes, I have peace, health, a son I love, work I'm passionate about. That makes me rich in many ways. He seemed satisfied. I knew there was something. Truly rich people don't need to prove it. The light turned green. The taxi moved forward. And what happened in that restaurant? He asked. If it's not too personal. I pretended to be poor, I replied. To see how they would treat me. He let out a laugh. Seriously, that's great. And how did they treat you? Like trash, I said without emotion. They humiliated me. They offered me charity. They treated me as if I were invisible, less than human. He stopped laughing. I'm sorry. That must have hurt. A little, I admitted, but it also confirmed something for me. That I was right about those people. That they weren't worth my time. That they didn't deserve my respect. And now they know it. Now they know who I am. And they're going to have to live with that shame. The taxi driver whistled softly. I bet it was epic. It was, I smiled. It definitely was. We arrived at my building. An old building, middle class, nothing luxurious, nothing impressive, but comfortable, safe, home. The taxi driver parked. He looked at the building. You live here? I live here, I confirmed. He shook his head in amazement. You really are special. Most people with money move to expensive areas, to buildings with a doorman, with private security. With a gym and a pool, you live like a normal person. I am a normal person, I replied. I just have more money than most. But that doesn't make me different. It doesn't make me better. Money is just a tool, not an identity. He smiled. I wish more people thought that way. The world would be better. I took out my wallet. How much is it? $30, he replied. I gave him a $100 bill. Keep the change. Ma'am, this is too much. It's not, I said. You listened to me. You gave me perspective. You reminded me that there are still good people. That's worth more than $70. He took the bill carefully. Thank you. Truly. Thank you, I replied. And take care of that honesty. It's rare. It's valuable. Don't lose it. I won't, he promised. I got out of the taxi. I closed the door. He rolled down the window. Ma'am, one last thing. Tell me. Whatever happened tonight, don't regret it. Don't look back. Because people like you, people who tell the truth even if it hurts, are the ones who change the world. Little by little, one conversation at a time. I smiled. Thank you. I'll remember that. The taxi drove away. I stood in front of my building, looking up. Towards my fifth-floor window, the light was off, dark, silent, waiting for me. I went into the building. I walked up the stairs. I never used the elevator. I preferred to walk, to stay active. I reached my door. I took out my keys, the same keys I had had for 15 years. I opened the door. The apartment was cold, empty. I turned on the light. Everything was in its place. The simple living room, the small kitchen, the dining area with mismatched chairs, the walls without expensive artwork. And I felt at peace. Because this place was mine. truly mine, not bought to impress, not decorated to show off, simply a space where I could be myself, without masks, without pretensions. I took off my old shoes. I took off the wrinkled grey dress. I put on comfortable clothes, an old pair of pajamas. Soft, familiar. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat on the sofa. I turned on the TV. News. Nothing interesting. I turned it off. I sat in silence, thinking, processing, feeling. And for the first time in many years, I felt completely free. Free from pretending, free from keeping quiet, free from tolerating, free from being less than I was. Because that night, I didn't just expose Deborah and Anthony, I also freed myself from expectations, from judgments, from the need to hide who I was. And that was invaluable. More than any figure in my bank account. My phone vibrated. Another message. This time from Robert. "Mum, did you get home safely?" I smiled. I replied quickly. "Yes, son. I got home perfectly fine. I'm home. Resting." His reply was immediate. "I love you. Thank you for everything. For being who you are. For teaching me. For never giving up." I closed my eyes. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Not of sadness, of relief, of love, of gratitude. I replied, "I love you too. Always." I put the phone aside. I drank my tea. I looked around my simple apartment, my refuge, my truth, and I smiled. Because at the end of the day, it didn't matter how much money I had. It didn't matter how high I had climbed in my career. The only thing that mattered was this moment, this peace, this honesty with myself. I woke up early on Sunday. As always, 40 years of working had trained me to get up with the sun. Even though it was my day off, my body no longer knew how to sleep late. I made coffee, strong, no sugar. I sat by the window with a hot cup in my hands. I watched the city wake up, vendors opening their stalls, people walking somewhere. Life went on, indifferent to personal dramas. My phone started ringing. It was a familiar number. "Robert," I answered. "Good morning, son." His voice sounded tired. "Mum, I need to talk to you." "Did something happen?" "A lot," he replied. "Last night, Chelsea and I talked for hours. Her parents were there too. It was intense." I took a sip of coffee. "Tell me." Robert sighed deeply. "After you left, I went back to the restaurant. Deborah and Anthony were still there, waiting for their cards to work. It was humiliating for them. Chelsea was devastated, crying, and I was furious. More furious than I've been in years." I waited in silence. He continued. "I told them everything I felt during that dinner. I told them I was ashamed of them, that they treated my mother like trash, that their behavior was unacceptable, that I wasn't going to tolerate it anymore." "And what did they say?" I asked. At first, Deborah tried to defend herself. She said they just wanted to protect Chelsea, that they wanted to make sure I had a stable family, that they didn't have bad intentions. Anthony said I was overreacting, that it had been a normal dinner, that your reaction was disproportionate. I gripped the cup in my hands. Typical. But then Chelsea spoke. Robert continued. She told her parents they were wrong, that they had been cruel, that she had seen every comment, every look, every disguised insult, and that she was ashamed to be their daughter in that moment. His voice broke. "Mum, I've never seen Chelsea stand up to her parents like that. I smiled slightly. That's good. It means she's waking up. Deborah got hysterical, Robert said. She started screaming that Chelsea was ungrateful, that they had sacrificed everything for her, that they had given her the best life, that she had no right to judge them. Anthony supported her. He said we were being manipulated by you, that you had planned everything to make them look bad. I let out a dry laugh. Of course. It's my fault. That's what made them angriest, Robert said. I told them they were right, that you did plan everything, but that they fell into the trap because that's really how they are, because they really treat people they consider inferior poorly, that you just gave them the opportunity to show themselves. And they did it perfectly. Well said, I murmured. Thanks. I learned it from you. There was a silence. Then Robert continued. Mum, I need you to know something. Last night I made a decision. Chelsea and I are going to set boundaries with her parents. We're not going to cut off the relationship, but we're going to set clear rules. No comments about money, no comparisons. No trying to control our lives. And if they can't respect that, then they'll have to accept the consequences. And they accepted? I asked. No, Robert replied. They left furious. They said we were ungrateful, that someday we would regret it, that when we needed help, they wouldn't be there. Anthony said he was going to reconsider his will. Deborah said Chelsea had chosen the wrong family. I shook my head. Emotional blackmail, the last resort of people without arguments. Exactly, Robert said. But it didn't work. Chelsea stood firm. I did too. They left the restaurant without saying goodbye, without looking back. And honestly, Mum, I felt relief, like a huge weight had been lifted off me. That's because it was, I told him. You lifted the weight of living under their expectations, under their control. Now you can build your life the way you want, not the way they dictate. Thank you, Mum, Robert said with an emotional voice. Thank you for doing what you did last night. I know it was difficult. I know it was uncomfortable, but we needed to see it. I needed to see who they really were, and Chelsea needed to see that there was another way to live, a more honest way, a more authentic way. You're welcome, son. I just did what I thought was right. There's something else, Robert said. Chelsea wants to come see you. She wants to apologize in person. She wants to talk to you, not as a daughter-in-law trying to look good, but as a woman trying to learn. What do you think? I thought for a moment. Tell her she can come, but not today. Give her a few days. Let her process. Let her think carefully about what she wants to say. Rushed apologies are hollow. The ones that take time are real. I'll tell her, Robert promised. Mum, one more question. How are you? After everything, how do you feel? I looked out the window. The sun was completely up now. The day had officially begun. I'm fine, I replied. Better than fine. I'm at peace. Because I finally said everything I needed to say, and I don't regret anything. I'm glad to hear that, Robert said. I love you. I love you too. Rest. I'll see you soon. I hung up the phone. I finished my coffee. I got up. I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time. Go for a walk. Aimlessly, without rushing. Just walk and think. I dressed in comfortable clothes, old jeans, a simple blouse, worn-out sneakers. I took my keys. I went out. The streets were full of life, families strolling, children running, couples holding hands, vendors offering food. The smell of fresh baked bread filled the air. I walked through the nearby park. I sat on a bench. I watched people pass by. And I realized something. Most of these people probably didn't have much money. They lived paycheck to paycheck. They worked hard. They struggled every day. But they were smiling. They were hugging. They were enjoying the moment. And then I thought about Deborah and Anthony, with all their money, their properties, their trips, their jewelry. Were they happy? Really? Or were they just busy trying to prove something, trying to fill a void with material things, trying to buy value, respect, love, things that have never been bought, that can never be bought? An older woman sat down next to me. "Good morning," she said with a smile. "Good morning," I replied. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" she commented. "Very beautiful," I agreed. She took bread from her bag. She began to feed the pigeons. "I come here every Sunday," she said. "It's my moment of peace, before the week gets crazy again." "I understand that," I said. "I needed a moment of peace too." "Tough week?" she asked. "Something like that," I replied. "More like a tough night." She nodded wisely. "Sometimes a single night can change everything." "You're right," I murmured. She looked at me. "May I give you an unsolicited piece of advice?" "Go ahead," I smiled. She pointed to the pigeons. "Look at those birds. Some are big, some small, some with beautiful feathers, others with battered feathers, but they all eat the same bread. They all share the same space. None thinks it's better than the other. That's a beautiful metaphor," I said. "It's not a metaphor," she replied. "It's the truth. Humans are the only animals who invent false hierarchies, who measure value with external things. Pigeons don't do that. They just live. They just are. We should learn from them." I smiled widely. "You're absolutely right. You should teach classes to some people I know." She laughed. "Oh, honey, at my age, I don't teach classes anymore. I just observe, and I share what I see. But most people don't listen. They're too busy running, buying, competing, forgetting that in the end we all end up in the same place, with or without money, with or without jewelry, with or without properties. We all end up turned to dust." "How philosophical," I commented. "How realistic," she corrected. "I've lived 82 years. I've seen everything. And I can tell you something. The most miserable people I ever met were the ones who had the most, because it was never enough. They always wanted more. They always competed. They always compared. And they died without ever having really lived, without ever having truly loved, without ever having truly been." Her words resonated deeply within me, as if she had touched something I already knew but hadn't articulated. "Thank you," I told her, "for sharing that." She patted my hand. "You're welcome, dear. And remember, it doesn't matter how much you have or don't have. What matters is how you treat others. Because that stays, that transcends. That is the only inheritance that's worth anything." She stood up slowly. She put her empty bag away. She waved goodbye. "Have a beautiful Sunday." "You too," I replied. I watched her walk away. A small woman, stooped with age, in old clothes and worn shoes, but with more wisdom than all the Deborahs and Anthonys in the world put together. And I felt grateful, grateful for that encounter, for that reminder, for that simple, powerful truth. I stayed on the bench for a little longer, thinking, feeling, processing everything that had happened, and I came to a conclusion. I didn't regret anything, not a word, not an action, because everything I did last night was necessary. It was liberating. It was honest. And honesty, even if it hurts, is always the right path. 3 days passed before Chelsea knocked on my door. 3 days of silence, of processing, of reflection. When I heard the doorbell ring that Wednesday afternoon, I knew who it was. I opened the door. There she was, no makeup, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, dressed in jeans and a simple blouse. No jewelry, no heels. She looked vulnerable, real, different from the woman I had seen in the restaurant. "Mother-in-law," she said in a low voice. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. "Go ahead." She walked in slowly, looking around, observing my apartment with new eyes, the simple living room, the old furniture, the walls without expensive decorations. She sat on the sofa when I motioned to it. I sat across from her, waiting, without pressuring, letting her find her words. "I don't know where to start," she finally said. "Start where you feel it," I replied. She took a deep breath. "I came to apologize, but not just with words. I came to explain why my parents are the way they are, and why I stayed quiet for so long." I listened to her in silence. Chelsea continued in a trembling voice. "My parents grew up poor, in a small town in Asia, without electricity, without running water. Working in the fields since they were children, they saw their own parents die young from lack of medicine, from lack of money. They went hungry, they suffered, and they promised each other they would never be poor again, that they would do whatever it took to get out of there." I nodded. "I understand. That explains a lot." "They worked like animals," Chelsea continued. "They saved every penny. They immigrated looking for opportunities. Anthony built his business from scratch, literally from scratch. And when they started making money, they never forgot what it was like not to have it. That's why they talk about it so much. That's why they measure everything by that standard. Because for them, money means survival, security, never going back to that dark place." "It's understandable," I said. "Trauma does strange things to people," and Chelsea nodded. "But that doesn't excuse how they treated you. I know. And I want you to know that I saw everything, every comment, every look, every insult. And I stayed quiet because I've been doing that my whole life, keeping quiet, accepting, letting them control everything, because they taught me that contradicting them was betrayal. It was ingratitude. And now," I asked, "now I understand that I was wrong." She replied, "That love is not control, that family is not blind obedience, that I can love them and still not agree with them. Robert helped me see it. You helped me see it. That night at the restaurant, when you revealed yourself, when you told them everything, it was like a blindfold was removed from my eyes." Chelsea wiped her tears. "I always knew something was wrong. I always felt that the way they measured people was incorrect. But I convinced myself that it was me, that I was too sensitive, that I didn't understand the world, but you showed me that I wasn't. That there is another way to live, a way where money doesn't define your value, where humility is strength, where authenticity is wealth." I took a sip of water. "Chelsea, I didn't come that night to change you. I came to protect myself, to know who I was dealing with." "I know," she replied, "and I thank you for that, because your brutal honesty saved me. It saved me from becoming my mother, from perpetuating that cycle, from teaching my future children that people are worth what they have. I don't want that. I don't want to be that." "And your parents?" I asked. "How are they after everything?" Chelsea sighed. "Furious, hurt, humiliated. Deborah hasn't spoken to me in 3 days. Anthony sent me a message saying I had disappointed him, that I had chosen strangers over my own blood, that someday I would regret it. She paused. And you know what's strange? I don't feel bad. I feel free. That's good, I said. It means you made the right decision. Chelsea nodded. Robert and I set boundaries. We told them they can be part of our lives, but only if they respect us, if they respect our decisions, if they stop trying to control us with money or with emotional blackmail. And if they can't do that, then they'll have to accept a distant relationship. How did they take that? I asked. Badly, Chelsea replied. Deborah said we were ungrateful, that they had sacrificed everything for me. Anthony threatened to disinherit me, to cut off all financial aid, as if that were the only thing we cared about. As if our love for them depended on their money, and that's when I realized. They truly believe that. They really think their worth is in their wallet. It's sad, I commented. Very sad, Chelsea agreed. Because they have so much, and they don't enjoy anything. They just accumulate, they compete, they show off. But they never stop to ask themselves if they are happy, if they have peace, if they have real connections with people. They just count their properties and feel victorious, while inside they are empty. She was silent for a moment. Then she looked directly at me. Mother-in-law, I want to ask you something. Tell me. I want to learn from you. I want you to teach me how to live with dignity, how to be rich without needing to show it, how to have peace in the midst of chaos, how to be strong without being cruel. Because that night I saw something in you that I never saw in my parents. I saw class. I saw real power. I saw a woman who didn't need to shout to be heard. I smiled tenderly. Chelsea, I can't teach you that. That is learned by living, by making mistakes, by falling down, by getting back up. The only thing I can do is share my experience and tell you that the path is not easy, that you are going to face criticism, judgment, people who won't understand why you live differently. But if you stay true to yourself, if you live according to your values, you will find peace. And that peace is worth more than any number. I want to try, Chelsea said. I want to be better, not just for Robert. For me, because I deserve to live without that constant pressure, without that need to impress, without that fear of not being enough. Then do it, I told her, but don't do it all at once. Do it little by little. Start by questioning your habits, your purchases, your motivations. Ask yourself before every decision, is this for me or for others? Does this give me peace or just appearance? Chelsea nodded, taking mental notes. And my parents? Do you think they'll ever change? I looked at her with honesty. I don't know. Change requires you to acknowledge a problem, and they don't think they have one. They think the world is wrong, that people are ungrateful, that they are victims. Until they see that, change is not possible. But you can change. You can break the cycle. I will, she promised, with Robert's help, and I hope with your guidance too. You don't need my guidance, I replied. You only need your inner compass. That voice that tells you what is right and what is wrong. That voice you silenced for years to please your parents. Listen to it. Trust it. Follow it. Chelsea wiped her last tears. Thank you, mother-in-law, for everything, for your patience, for your honesty, for not giving up on us. There's nothing to thank me for, I said. Just promise me one thing. When you have children, Teach them the value of people, not the price. Teach them empathy, humility, kindness, things that don't cost money but are worth everything. I promise, Chelsea said firmly. I promise with all my heart. We hugged. A real hug. Warm, honest, without acting, without masks. Just two women connecting as human beings. Chelsea left an hour later, lighter, freer, with hope in her eyes. I closed the door behind her. I sat down on my sofa again. I looked around my simple apartment, and I smiled, because this was enough. This was everything. An honest space, an authentic life, real relationships. I didn't need more. I never needed more. My phone rang. It was a message from Robert. Mum, Chelsea told me about her visit. Thank you for welcoming her, for listening to her, for giving her a chance. I love you more than words can express. I replied simply, I love you too, son. Always. I put the phone aside. I sat by the window. I watched the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, and in that moment I understood something fundamental. Real wealth is not in how much you have, it is in how much you enjoy what you have, in how much peace you feel, in how many genuine people surround you, in how many times you can look in the mirror and be proud of who you are. Deborah and Anthony had millions, but I had this tranquility, this authenticity, this pure love from my son, and that made me infinitely richer than them. I never pretended to be poor again. I didn't need to. I had learned what I needed to learn. I had seen what I needed to see. And I had freed what I needed to free. Deborah and Anthony remained who they were, rich in money, poor in spirit. But that was no longer my problem. I had spoken my truth. I had set my boundaries. I had protected my peace. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to pretend who I was. I simply was. Jeanette, mother, executive, woman, survivor, fighter, rich in every sense that truly mattered. And that was more than enough. It was everything.